Ever wonder what it's like to fall hard for someone who's all wrong but feels so damn right? Evening. My lovely ladies, your old pal Joan Doe, 58 and still kicking, sipping whiskey and spinning yarns for you fine gals. Picture me, creaky knees and all, chatting like we're at Betty's diner, dishing dirt over pie. Tonight, I've got a tale that'll make your heart race and your cheeks flush a filly love story with fire, grit, and a kiss that'd make your granny blush. It's messy, it's real, and it's got more sparks than a 4th of July bender. So, grab your wine, lean in, and let's dive into Ivonne and Alexander's wild ride. Love it. Drop a comment, would you fight for a love this crazy? And hey, subscribe for more juicy tales. The old city headquarters of Kingsley Enterprises was a fortress of glass and steel, its top-floor executive suite bathed in the eerie green neon glow of computer screens and the hum of high-powered servers. Outside, Philadelphia's skyline flickered under a bruised dusk, the Squealkill River catching the last slivers of light like a blade. Inside, Ivonne Porter's fingers danced across a keyboard, each keystroke a sharp, deliberate note in a symphony she'd mastered over a decade in cybersecurity. At 32, Ivonne wasn't the type to turn heads in a corporate boardroom full-figured, with a faint limp from a car accident that left a titanium rod in her left leg. But right now, she was a goddamn force. Her dark eyes, sharp behind sleek rectangular glasses, narrowed as she hunted the digital ghost that had crashed Kingsley's system, her braids swinging like a pendulum with every move. The air was thick with the sterile tang of electronics and the faint cedar of Alexander Kingsley's cologne, a scent that invaded her space like an uninvited guest. At 38, he was Philadelphia's king, a billionaire whose tech empire, Kingsley Enterprises, owned half the city's digital backbone. He loomed behind her, 6'3" of impatience in a tailored suit that probably cost more than her rent. Any luck? His voice was a low growl, cutting through the hum of the servers like a blade. I'd have better luck if you weren't breathing down my neck. Ivonne shot back, not looking up, her voice calm but edged with steel, unlike the jittery suits who tiptoed around Alexander. She didn't give a damn about his title. She was here to fix a problem, not stroke his ego. Alexander raised an eyebrow, his jaw tightening, unused to anyone in his orbit talking back. Most people shrank under his gaze or nodded like bobbleheads at his every word. Ivonne did neither. This is a multi-million-dollar system, he said, stepping closer, his shadow falling across her screen. I needed up yesterday. Then let me do my fucking job, she replied, her fingers never pausing, her tone flat but firm, like she was scolding a kid who'd spilled juice on her laptop. She leaned closer to the monitor, the green light catching the burnished gold of the Adinkra ring on her left hand, its intricate symbols glinting like a secret she hadn't meant to share. Alexander's eyes flicked to the ring, a flicker of something recognition, maybe crossing his face, but he didn't comment. Instead, he stepped back, his boots scuffing the polished hardwood, giving her space, but not leaving. He was captivated, though he'd never admit it, by the way she worked, methodical, unflinching, like she was cracking a safe instead of code. What's the damage, he asked, checking his watch, a sleek Patek Philippe that screamed money. Yvonne's lips twitched, suppressing a sigh. Your system didn't just crash, it was gutted. Someone inside your company tried to siphon off confidential files, tripped my security protocols, and locked everything down. She glanced up, her eyes locking with his, dark and unflinching. This wasn't some script kiddie in a basement, it's an inside job. Alexander cursed under his breath, his mind already racing through suspects, executives, coders, maybe even his damn CFO. Can you tell who? Give me 10 minutes, Ivonne said, her voice steady, like she was promising coffee instead of cracking a corporate conspiracy. I'll have your system back, and the bastard's ID. Their eyes held for a moment, hers sharp with quiet confidence, his burning with something he couldn't name, admiration, maybe, or something hotter. Roar. The air crackled, the hum of the servers fading to a dull roar, the neon light painting their faces in shades of electric green. Alexander stepped closer, drawn by her fire, her defiance, the way she didn't bend under his weight. You're fucking unreal, he said, his voice low, rough, like he'd been holding the words too long. Ivonne froze, her fingers hovering over the keys, her pulse kicking up as his cedar scent wrapped around her like a dare. Don't, she said, her voice wavering, caught between defiance and something softer, her cane tapping the floor as she steadied herself. This ain't in your goddamn playbook, Kingsley. He didn't listen. His hand reached out, slow, brushing her shoulder, fingers grazing the thin silk of her blouse, the warmth of her skin seeping through. Fuck the playbook, he murmured, and then his lips were on hers, hungry, like he'd been starving for this without knowing it. The kiss was deep, slow, a collision of need and restraint, his mouth tasting of whiskey and want, her breath catching as she leaned into him, her hands sliding up his chest, fingers curling into his jacket. The neon flickered, casting their shadows in a swaying dance across the wall, the soft creak of the floor mingling with their ragged breaths. His thumb traced her jaw, tilting her face up, the adinkra ring glinting as her hand gripped his arm, grounding her in the storm of it all. Ivonne yanked back, gasping, her lips tingling, eyes blazing like she'd just fought a war and wasn't sure who'd won. This doesn't change a goddamn thing, she said, stepping away, her cane tapping sharp against the hardwood, her chest heaving. You don't get to play me like one of your fucking deals. Alexander looked like he'd been punched, his hands still hovering where she'd been, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Ivonne. But she was already turning, her silhouette fierce against the neon glow, her braid swinging like a blade as she limped back to the keyboard, leaving him standing there, the echo of her fire and that kiss burning in his veins, like a hymn he didn't deserve. 1 month earlier, Fishtown was Philadelphia's beating heart, a tangle of graffiti-splashed row houses and dive bars where the air smelled of yeast from breweries and the Schuylkill's muddy edge. Ivonne Porter lived in a second-floor walk-up, the kind of place where the radiator hissed like a pissed-off cat, and the landlord's voicemail was always full. At 32, she was a single black woman who'd built a name in cybersecurity, her days split between freelance gigs and late nights with her violin. The one thing that hushed the world's noise. A car accident at 15 had left a jagged scar snaking up her left calf, a titanium rod pinning her bones together, and a limp that drew stares, some pitying, some cruel. Her body, full and curved, too much by tech bro standards, got the same treatment. But her hands, when they danced over a keyboard or coaxed gospel from her mother's violin, were unstoppable. She'd dreamed of MIT, of coding systems that ran cities, But dreams didn't pay $150,000 in medical debt or keep the lights on. That night, her apartment was cold, the heater coughing dust, and Ivonne sat at her cluttered desk, a laptop casting a blue glow across her face. Her mother, Clara, had died 3 years ago, cancer eating her fast, leaving behind a hospital bill and a burnished gold ring etched with 8 Incra symbols: perseverance, wisdom, strength. Ivonne wore it always, a tether to the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked double shifts as a nurse to buy that violin, who'd taught her to fight like hell. "Never let 'em dim your light, baby," Clara used to say, her voice a gospel hum over catfish frying in the kitchen. Yvonne's phone pinged. An email from Dr. Sofia Hernandez, a historian at Penn who'd been helping her trace the ring's origins. Found a lead on the Adinkra symbols. Might tie to a 19th century Philadelphia family Kingsley. "Call me." Yvonne's brow furrowed, the name Kingsley ringing a bell she couldn't place. She'd heard of Kingsley Enterprises, the tech giant that owned half the city's data centers, but a family tie. That was news. Another ping, this one, a job offer from Kingsley Enterprises, flagged urgent. Their system was down, hacked from the inside, and they needed the best. The pay was enough to chip at her debt, maybe even let her breathe for a month. Yvonne hesitated, her thumb hovering over the reply button. She didn't trust corporate types, didn't like the way they looked at her like a novelty. Not a pro. But Clara's voice echoed, "Take the shot, baby." She typed back, "I'm in. Tomorrow. 8 a.m. The next morning." She stood in Kingsley's old city lobby, cane in hand, her leather jacket a quiet fuck you to the suits gawking like she'd wandered into the wrong building. The receptionist, all fake smiles and frosted lipstick, buzzed her up to the top floor, where Alexander Kingsley waited, his presence like a storm rolling in sharp jaw, sharper eyes, and a suit that screamed he'd never known a broke day in his life. "Here's the deal," he said, tossing a tablet onto his desk, the screen flashing error codes. "System's fucked. Someone's stealing secrets. Fix it. Name your price." Yvonne's grip tightened on her cane, her eyes narrowing. "You're a smug asshole." "You know that," she said, voice low, steady. "I don't work for smirks. I work for results. Give me access, and stay out of my way." His smirk faltered, a flicker of respect crossing his face, and he nodded, stepping aside. "Access granted." "Don't waste my time." Yvonne didn't waste it. She'd been at Kingsley for a week now, her days a blur of code and coffee, her nights haunted by that email from Hernandez. The ring on her finger felt heavier, its symbols whispering secrets she couldn't yet read. The office was a pressure cooker, all glass walls and whispered hierarchies, and Yvonne felt the weight of every stare tech bros muttering about diversity quotas. Secretaries eyeing her cane like it was a flaw she should hide. At a corner deli near the office, a cashier had hissed, "What's she doing with Kingsley? Gotta be a PR stunt." Yvonne had gripped her cane, jaw tight, and walked out, but the words stuck like tar. Makita, the owner of a Fishtown jazz joint where Yvonne sometimes played, was the only one who didn't judge. She'd slide Yvonne a bourbon and say, "You're tougher than a Philly cheesesteak, girl. Don't let those corporate pricks dim you." Yvonne would nod, but inside, she wasn't sure. Alexander was a fortress cold, unyielding, impossible to read. She didn't trust him, didn't want him close, didn't need his damn cologne clouding her focus. But there were moments that threw her off, like when she caught him watching her debug a server, his eyes lingering not with pity, but with something softer, like he saw past the cane, the scars, the chip on her shoulder, or when he left a coffee on her desk with a post-it keep sharp. We need you. It wasn't kindness, not exactly, but it was enough to make her wonder what lay beneath all that arrogance. The press conference was a week away, and Ivonne dreaded it. She stood in her temporary office, a glass box overlooking Old City's cobblestone streets, trying on a dress Alexander's assistant had sent navy, sleek, hugging her curves in a way that felt like a spotlight on every roll, every imperfection. The mirror was brutal, showing all the reasons she'd spent years hiding too big, too black, too broken for a place like this. She hated it, hated him for making her play this part. She stepped into the hallway, needing air, the city's hum a dull roar below. Her cane sank into the plush carpet, and she leaned against a window, closing her eyes. For a moment, she heard her mom's voice, singing This Little Light of Mine, telling her to shine no matter what. Alexander's voice cut through, low and rough, planning to bail already. She turned, startled. He stood in the doorway, a whiskey glass in hand, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, the city lights catching the grief etched into his face, a scar above his eyebrow glinting like a secret. "Not yet," Ivonne said, her voice steady. "But don't push me." "Kingsley," he chuckled, stepping closer, the cedar scent wrapping around her again. "You're not what I expected. You know that." "What? Thought I'd be some grateful tech nerd, kissing your boots." She raised an eyebrow, her tone dry as the squeal-kill in summer. "Maybe." He took a sip, eyes locked on hers, the whiskey glinting amber in the light. "But you've got fire, Ivonne, more than anyone in this damn building." Her chest tightened, his words hitting harder than she wanted, stirring the memory of that kiss, the way it had felt like he saw her, scars and all. "Save it," she said, turning back to the city, her cane tapping softly. "I'm here for the job, not your charm." He didn't reply, but she felt his gaze, heavy as a touch, lingering as the wind carried the scent of asphalt and distant rain. For a moment, they stood there, two strangers bound by a job and something neither could name. The city's pulse, a steady rhythm below. The ballroom of the Penn's Landing Marriott in Philadelphia's Old City was a glittering prison, its chandeliers spilling light like liquid gold, casting a sheen over tables draped in white linen and littered with champagne flutes. The air was heavy with the scent of overpriced perfume, polished leather, and the sharp tang of oysters on ice, a sensory assault that screamed money. Ivonne Porter stood at the edge of the room, her navy dress clinging to her curves like a second skin, too tight, too bold. The fabric hugged every roll, every scar, and the polished aluminum cane in her hand felt like a neon sign screaming outsider. At 32, she was no stranger to stairs. Fishtown's dive bars had taught her that. With her limp from a teenage car accident and a body that didn't fit corporate America's mold, but this was different. These weren't street corner whispers. These were the eyes of Philadelphia's elite, dissecting her with a kind of polite venom that cut deeper than a knife. Alexander Kingsley moved through the crowd like he owned it, which he damn near did. His tailored tuxedo was cut to perfection, accentuating broad shoulders and a jawline sharp enough to draw blood. At 38, he was a billionaire who commanded rooms with a glance, shaking hands with city council members and tech moguls, his low laugh carrying over the clink of glasses. Ivonne was supposed to be his cybersecurity savior, the genius consultant to sell his redemption after a data breach that had Kingsley Enterprises bleeding millions. But every time he glanced her way, she felt like a prop in his goddamn circus. Smile. Porter, he'd whispered as they entered, his breath warm against her ear, cedar cologne wrapping around her like a challenge. These assholes eat that shit up. I'm not your fucking puppet. Kingsley, she'd hissed, her eyes sharp enough to cut glass, her cane tapping the marble floor like a warning shot. He'd chuckled, low and infuriating, but didn't push. Now, as she hovered near a table of caviar nobody was eating, her cane clicked against the polished floor, a steady rhythm that anchored her against the weight of their stares. They weren't subtle. A woman in a sequined gown leaned toward her friend, her voice slicing through the hum of string quartets. She's his charity case. Right, poor thing, her friend, diamonds glittering at her throat like a chokehold, nodded. Has to be PR. No way Kingsley's slumming it with that. Yvonne's stomach twisted, a hot flush creeping up her neck, her knuckles whitening around her cane. She'd heard worse kids in school calling her cripple or tank, strangers on the SEPTA muttering about her size, but this was a gut punch. These people didn't just judge her. They erased her, reduced her to a punchline in Alexander's redemption tour. She grabbed a champagne flute, more to stop her hands from shaking than to drink, and took a sip. It tasted like ash. Alexander appeared beside her, his presence heavy, like a storm rolling in over the Delaware. You're doing fine, he said, voice low, like he was coaxing a skittish horse. Just keep your head up. Fuck you, she muttered, not looking at him, her grip tightening on the glass until it felt like it might crack. I don't need your goddamn babysitting. His jaw clenched, but before he could reply, a man in a pinstripe suit, some venture capital prick with a gin-soaked grin, stumbled over, his eyes raking Yvonne like she was a used car on a lot. Well, damn. Kingsley, he slurred. Where'd you dig this one up? The IT department. The room didn't stop, but it might as well have. Yvonne's pulse roared in her ears, her cane trembling in her hand. Alexander stepped forward, his fist twitching like he was ready to deck the guy, but Yvonne was faster. Keep staring, asshole, she snapped, her voice a switchblade, cutting through the chatter. It's free, but you're still getting fucked over. The man blinked, caught off guard, then forced a laugh, brittle as ice. The crowd shifted, some smirking, others turning away, their whispers buzzing like a swarm of hornets. Alexander's lips twitched, almost a smile, but Yvonne didn't care. She turned and walked out, her cane tapping a furious rhythm against the marble, the weight of their eyes burning her back like a brand. Outside, the Philadelphia night was raw, the kind of humid chill that sank into your bones and held tight. The Squirrel River Trail stretched along the water, its streetlights casting yellow pools on the cracked pavement, their hum mingling with the soft lap of the river and the distant rumble of traffic. Yvonne leaned against the cold iron of the Walnut Street Bridge, her breath clouding in the air, the dress doing jack shit to keep her warm. She closed her eyes, trying to drown out the voices, the gin-soaked prick, the sequined bitch, her own, whispering she didn't belong, never would, that she was just a broke black girl with a cane and a chip on her shoulder, playing dress-up in a world that'd chew her up and spit her out. Boots crunched on the gravel path, and she knew it was Alexander before he spoke. What the hell was that? His voice was rough, not angry, but close, like he was holding back a tidal wave. You can't just bolt like that. You're my lead consultant. Your consultant. She spun, glaring, her cane digging into the dirt, her eyes flashing under the streetlight's glow. He stood a few feet away, tie loosened, his face half lit, the scar above his eyebrow catching the light like a secret. I'm your goddamn hired gun. Kingsley, wake the fuck up. Though I don't owe you a smile or a performance. He moved closer, his boots scuffing the gravel, closing the gap until they were nearly chest to chest. The river's damp chill no match for the heat rolling off him. You think I wanted this dog and pony show? You think I like parading you like some trophy? I'm trying to save my company. Yvonne, this is the game. Then get a new player. Her voice cracked, loud enough to echo off the bridge, raw with everything she'd been choking down: anger, shame, the sting of that kiss in his office that still burned her lips. I'm not your prop, your pity case, or your fucking savior. You hired me because I'm desperate, not because I'm special. Alexander's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening, a spark flaring like a match struck in the dark. That's bullshit, he said, his voice low, almost a growl, thick with something that wasn't just frustration. You're not here because you're desperate. You're here because you're the best. Fuck your flattery. She stepped into his space, close enough to feel his breath, her cane steady against the gravel, her voice trembling with defiance. You saw a broke-ass black girl with a cane, someone you could flash for your PR stunt. Don't act like you give a damn about who I am. He didn't back down, closing the last inch, the streetlight carving shadows across his face, his cedar scent wrapping around her like a challenge. You don't know what I see, he said, his voice a rough whisper, heavy with something that made her pulse race. You don't know a goddamn thing. Then tell me, she shouted, her chest heaving, tears pricking her eyes, her voice raw with need and rage. What do you see? Kingsley, a fat, limping nobody who's only good for your headlines? Or do you just get off unscrewing with me for a split second? He was still, his breath ragged, eyes burning into hers like he could see straight through her armor. Then his hands shot out, grabbing her shoulders, pulling her against him. His lips crashed into hers, hard and desperate, a tangle of hunger and truth that stole her breath. It was raw, messy, his mouth claiming hers with a ferocity that made her knees buckle, her cane clattering to the gravel as she pushed back, her hands fisting in his jacket, nails digging through the fabric. The world narrowed to the rough scrape of his stubble, the cold iron of the bridge's railing biting into her back as he pressed her against it, the soft lap of the river swallowed by their jagged breaths. His fingers slid to her neck, thumb grazing her pulse, racing like a drum, and she tasted the whiskey on his tongue, sharp and dizzying, mixed with the salt of her own tears. She yanked away, gasping, her lips swollen, eyes blazing, chest heaving like she'd sprinted across the city. What the fuck was that? Alexander looked as stunned as she felt, his hands hovering where her shoulders had been, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts, his tux rumpled where she'd gripped him. I don't know, he admitted, voice hoarse, raw, like he'd just run headlong into something he couldn't name. But you're not nobody. Yvonne. Not to me. She laughed, sharp and bitter, snatching her cane from the ground, her fingers trembling as she gripped it, the cold metal grounding her against the storm in her chest. You're full of shit. She turned, her steps uneven, the tap of her cane loud against the gravel, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She didn't look back, but his gaze burned into her, heavy as the Schuylkill's current, a weight she couldn't shake. Back in her Fishtown apartment, Yvonne locked the door and sank onto her couch, her heart still racing like a freight train. She ripped off the dress, letting it crumple on the floor like a shed lie, and stood before the cracked full-length mirror in her bedroom. The dim glow of a single lamp unforgiving, the scar on her left calf snaked like a riverbed, a jagged reminder of the accident that stole her ease, her dreams, her teenage years, her body full, soft. Too much stared back. Every curve a reason she'd learned to shrink, to hide. She touched the adinkra ring on her finger, its gold warm against her skin, and wondered if Alexander had really seen her in that kiss, or if it was just another move in his corporate chess game. She grabbed her violin, the worn wood a tether to her mother, Clara, to the woman she used to be before debt and stares and a world that didn't want her. She didn't play. Not tonight. She just held it, the strings cool under her fingertips, grounding her against the chaos in her chest. That kiss hot, reckless, real, kept replaying. The way his hands had gripped her, the way he'd looked at her, like she was more than a contract, more than a fix for his broken system. But she didn't trust it, didn't trust him. He was a man who bought solutions, and she was just another problem to solve. Wasn't she across town? Alexander stood in his penthouse, a glass and steel palace overlooking Philadelphia's twinkling skyline, the Schuylkill a dark ribbon below. A bourbon bottle sat half empty on the counter, the amber liquid catching the city's glow. But he didn't touch it. He hadn't changed out of his tux, the tie gone, tossed in a fit of frustration. He'd fucked up. He knew it. Kissing her again was a mistake. But it hadn't felt like one. Not when her lips were on his, not when she'd pushed back like she wanted it too. Yvonne wasn't part of the plan. She was supposed to be a quick fix, a way to save Kingsley Enterprises from a PR nightmare. But the way she'd shut down that drunk asshole, the fire in her eyes when she called him out, she was more than he'd bargained for, more than he could handle. He glanced at a framed photo of his grandfather, Elijah, his stern face a silent accusation. Alexander turned away, the memory of his voice. Be better. Alex cutting deeper than he'd admit. He didn't know what he was doing with Yvonne. But he knew one thing: he wasn't letting her walk away. The next morning, Yvonne was in her temporary office at Kingsley, a glass box that felt more like a fishbowl. The city's hum muffled beyond the windows. She brewed coffee, the machine hissing like it was as pissed as she was, her cane propped against the desk. Her laptop screen glowed with code. But her mind was elsewhere on that kiss, on the gala, on the email from Dr. Sofia Hernandez she hadn't answered. Kingsley family. Call me. Alexander knocked, his silhouette sharp in the doorway, his face rough with stubble, eyes shadowed like he hadn't slept. We need to talk, he said, voice gravelly, like he'd been chewing gravel all night. She didn't turn, pouring coffee with deliberate slowness, the steam curling like a ghost. About what your brilliant plan to parade me like a zoo animal about last night. He stepped inside, the door clicking shut, the floor creaking under his boots. I shouldn't have. I didn't mean to kiss me. She spun, her eyes sharp, cutting through him like a blade. Or let your fancy friends make me feel like shit, because you're nailing both. He winced, rubbing the back of his neck, his usual polish nowhere in sight. I'm not good at this. Okay, I'm trying to keep my company from tanking, same as you're trying to keep your head above water. That guy was a prick, and I should have shut him down faster. Yeah, you should have. She slammed the mug down, coffee sloshing over the rim, the sound sharp in the quiet office. But you didn't. You let them stare. Let them talk. Because it's all part of your fucking empire. I'm done playing your game. Kingsley. She moved to walk past him, her cane tapping against the hardwood, but he caught her arm, not hard. Just enough to stop her, his touch warm, electric, despite the anger burning in her chest. Don't, he said, voice low, almost pleading, his eyes searching hers. Don't walk away. I see you, Yvonne, more than you know. She pulled free, her eyes boring into his, looking for the lie, the catch. She didn't find one. But trust was a bridge she couldn't cross. Not yet. Not with a man who'd hired her to fix his mess. Then prove it. She said, her voice barely a whisper, raw with challenge, because words don't mean shit. Later that day, Yvonne got a text from Ava, her best friend, a dancer with a laugh that could light up a room. Heard you're slumming it with Mr. Billionaire. Spill the tea, girl. Yvonne smiled, but the weight of the gala clung to her like damp clothes, heavy and cold. She needed something real, something hers. Ava had been pushing her to play her violin at Makita's jazz joint in Fishtown, a low-stakes gig with locals who'd known her since she was a kid. Yvonne had always said no, too many eyes, too much risk, but now she wasn't so sure. Maybe it was time to stop hiding, to stop letting the world's judgment define her. She found Alexander in his office, scrolling through reports. The city skyline a stark backdrop through the glass, all steel and shadow. I'm playing at Makita's, she said. No preamble, her cane steady against the floor, her voice firm. Violin, not asking your permission, just telling you. He looked up, surprised, a faint smile softening the hard lines of his face. That's good. You need a ride. She raised an eyebrow, her voice dry as asphalt. I need you to stay out of my way, and don't expect me to play your perfect consultant at that press conference while I'm at it. He leaned back, his chuckle low, warm, like a fire catching. Fair enough. But you're still doing the conference. We need you. She glared but nodded, her jaw tight, her resolve hardening. Fine. But you owe me. Kingsley. As she turned to leave, her cane tapping a steady rhythm, Alexander watched her go, a knot tightening in his chest. She was fire. And he was starting to realize he didn't mind getting burned. Makita's jazz joint in Philadelphia's Fishtown was a slice of soul carved into a gritty corner lot, its walls steeped in the scent of warm cornbread, spilled bourbon, and the faint musk of cigarette smoke that lingered despite the city's bans. The neon sign above the bar buzzed, casting a crimson glow that flickered like a pulse, bathing the scarred wooden tables in a soft, forgiving haze. Ivonne Porter stood at the edge of the makeshift stage, her violin case clutched like a lifeline. At 32, she was used to eyes on her Fishtown streets had taught her that, with her limp, her curves, her black skin drawing stares like moths to a flame. But tonight was different. Tonight. She wasn't Alexander Kingsley's cybersecurity fix or the gala's punching bag. Tonight, she was herself, or at least the version of herself that still believed in music, in gospel, in something bigger than the weight of her world. Her loose flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, was a stark contrast to the navy dress that had made her feel like a fraud at the Marriott. Her cane rested against a stool, close enough to grab if her leg gave out. The crowd, maybe 60 locals, nursing beers and swapping stories, was loud, their laughter a warm hum that filled the room like a heartbeat. Yvonne didn't care if they listened. She'd said yes to this gig because Ava, her best friend, wouldn't shut up about it, texting her non-stop. "Get your ass on that stage, girl. Show him you're more than his corporate bullshit." Yvonne wasn't sure she had anything left to show, but she was done hiding, done letting the world's judgment chain her down. Alexander Kingsley sat at a corner table, half hidden in the shadows, his usual tailored suit swapped for a plain charcoal jacket that didn't quite blend with the joint's vibe. At 38, he was a billionaire who owned data centers. But here, he was just a man, his bourbon glass untouched, his eyes locked on Yvonne. He hadn't said much since the gala, since that kiss on the Schuylkill River Trail that still burned in her memory the heat of his lips, the iron railing against her back, the way it felt like he meant it. She'd told him to prove he saw her, and so far, he'd kept his distance, like he was afraid of fucking it up again. But his gaze followed her now, steady, not with the arrogance she'd come to expect, but with something softer, like he was waiting for her to rewrite his world. Makita, the joint's owner, a woman with silver-streaked braids and a smile that could hush a riot, grabbed the mic, her voice booming over the chatter. "Ivonne Porter, y'all give her some Philly love." The crowd clapped, some whooping, their energy wrapping around Yvonne like a warm blanket. She stepped onto the stage, her cane tapping the worn wood, the spotlight hot against her skin. For a second, she froze, the weight of their eyes pressing down, whispering, "Who's she?" Kingsley's sidekick. "What's with the cane?" She pushed it away, lifting her violin, the wood warm from her mother's hands and her own. She closed her eyes, and the first note came, low and trembling, like a prayer breaking free. It was Wade in the Water, a gospel melody her mom, Clara, used to hum, woven with something raw, something that tasted like Philadelphia's street's grit, loss, stubborn hope. The notes built, her bow slicing through the air, the sound swelling until it drowned out the crowd's chatter, spilling into the night. The jukebox fell silent. The room stilled, beers forgotten, eyes fixed on her. Yvonne didn't see it. She was lost, her body swaying despite the ache in her leg, her fingers dancing over the strings. The violin sang of her mom's kitchen, her childhood dreams, the debt and judgment that tried to bury her. When the final note faded, soft as a sigh, the joint erupted, applause and whistles shaking the walls. She opened her eyes, blinking against the spotlight, and saw Ava in the front row, her pink braids glowing, screaming like a groupie at a rock concert. Makita clapped, her grin wide as the Delaware. The crowd was on their feet, shouting her name, their voices a chorus of pride. Yvonne's chest tightened, not with fear but with something new pride. Maybe, or just the feeling of being seen, really seen, for the first time in years. She glanced at Alexander, still in the corner, his face half lit by the red glow. He wasn't clapping, but his eyes burned into her, and the look in them made her skin prickle. It wasn't pity or surprise. It was awe, raw and unguarded, like he'd just glimpsed something sacred. After the set, Yvonne slipped out the back door, needing air. The alley behind Makita's was cool, the pavement slick from an earlier drizzle, the air sharp with the smell of wet asphalt and the faint yeast of a nearby brewery. She leaned her cane against a dumpster, rubbing her leg, the scar throbbing from standing too long. Her violin was back in its case, but the music still echoed in her head, grounding her against the chaos of the last week, the gala, the kiss, the adinkra ring that felt heavier every day. Alexander found her, his boots crunching on gravel, the sound sharp in the quiet. That was... He paused, searching for a word that didn't sound like corporate bullshit, his breath visible in the chilly air. That was fucking unreal. Yvonne. She turned, wary, her braid swinging, catching the dim light from a street lamp. He ditched the jacket, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, showing a sliver of collarbone that made her pause despite herself. "Don't patronize me," she said, but her voice lacked its usual edge, softened by the music, by the night. "I didn't do it for you. I know." He stepped closer, the red glow from the joint sign painting his face in shades of crimson. "But I'm glad I saw it. You're not just fire. Yvonne, you're a goddamn inferno." She snorted, but a smile tugged at her lips, betraying her, warm and unbidden. "Smooth talker. Bet you say that to all your consultants. Only the ones who make me feel like a damn fool." His grin faded, replaced by something softer, almost vulnerable, his eyes searching hers. "I mean it. You're more than I thought." Her throat tightened, his words hitting harder than she wanted, stirring the memory of that kiss on the bridge, the way it had felt like he saw her, scars and all. She wanted to believe him, but trust was a minefield, especially with a man like Alexander, who'd built his empire on control. "Words are cheap," she said quietly, looking out at the alley, where a stray cat slunk past a stack of crates, its eyes glinting in the dark. "You want to prove it? Start listening." He nodded, like he was taking it in, his hands shoved in his pockets, the gesture boyish, disarming. "Fair enough. How about a drink inside? No pressure. Just us." She hesitated, her instincts screaming to keep her walls up, to protect the fragile thing she'd reclaimed tonight. But the music had left her raw, open, and the idea of sitting with him, talking like people, not pawns, didn't sound half bad. "One drink," she said, grabbing her cane, the tap of it steady against the pavement. "And you're paying." Inside. The joint was quieter now, the crowd thinning, the jukebox switching to a slow Sam Cooke tune. A change is gonna come. They sat in a corner booth. Yvonne's cane propped against the wall, a pitcher of bourbon-spiked sweet tea between them. The red light bathed the table in a warm glow, catching the stubble on Alexander's jaw, the faint scar above his eyebrow. They talked, really talked for the first time. Yvonne told him about her mom, Clara, how she'd hum gospel while frying catfish, how she'd pawned her wedding ring to buy Yvonne's first violin. Alexander listened, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. And when she paused, he spoke, his voice low, rough, like he was unearthing something buried. "My mom loved music too," he said, staring into his tea, the amber liquid catching the light. "Not gospel soul, Aretha, Marvin Gaye. She'd dance with me in our shitty apartment, spinning me till I laughed. Raised me alone after my dad died in a car wreck. I was 12 when she went too same crash." Yvonne watched him, saw the way his shoulders slumped, the grief he carried like a shadow, heavy and unspoken. "What happened?" she asked, softer than she meant. Her voice barely above the jukebox's croon. "Drunk driver," he said, his voice flat, like he'd locked the pain away. "I was in the back seat, only one who walked away. My grandfather took me in, taught me everything business, control, how to bury shit deep. Biggest regret. Never giving her the life she deserved. She didn't say anything, just reached across the table, her fingers brushing his knuckles, calloused despite his wealth. It wasn't pity, it was understanding. The kind that came from losing the person who was your whole damn world." He looked at her, surprised. And for a moment, they just sat there, the jukebox singing about change, about hope, their hands touching like a bridge across the gap between them. The music shifted, a slower tune. "You send me." And Alexander stood, holding out his hand, his eyes soft but determined. "Dance with me." Yvonne laughed, shaking her head, the sound sharp in the quiet. "You serious? I can barely walk without tripping, let alone dance. I don't give a damn." His voice was firm, but his eyes were pleading, like he needed this as much as she did. One dance. Nobody's watching. She hesitated, then took his hand, letting him pull her up. Her cane left behind. Her bad leg wobbled, but he held her steady. One arm around her waist, the other guiding her hand to his shoulder. They swayed, more shuffle than dance, the red light painting their faces in shades of crimson. His hand was warm on her back, his breath grazing her temple, and she caught the faint cedar of his cologne, mixed with the sharp bite of bourbon from his glass. Her body pressed closer, her curves fitting against him, and she felt his pulse quicken, matching hers, a rhythm that echoed the saxophone's mournful wail. The air thickened, charged, her skin tingling where his fingers rested, just above the small of her back. "You're not half bad at this," she murmured, her cheek brushing his jaw, the stubble rough against her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. "You're full of surprises," he replied, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her, his hand sliding lower, fingers splaying across the silk of her shirt. The world narrowed to this, the heat of his touch, the slow sway of their bodies, the saxophone wrapping them in its spell. She tilted her head, her lips inches from his, the memory of their last kiss sparking in her chest, hot and reckless, her breath catching. She pulled back just before their lips met, her breath shaky, hand lingering on his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart. "I can't. Alexander," she said, stepping away, her voice barely steady, raw with want and fear. "Not when our history's a fucking minefield." He nodded, his eyes dark with something that wasn't just desire, regret, maybe, or hope, his hand falling to his side. "I hear you," he said, his voice softer now, like he was treading carefully. "But I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, trouble came knocking. Ivonne was in her office at Kingsley Enterprises, a glass box overlooking Old City's cobblestone streets, the air sharp with the scent of burnt coffee from a cheap machine. Her laptop glowed with code, but her mind was on last night, the dance, the almost kiss. The way Alexander's hand had felt like an anchor. Her cane leaned against the desk, and she wore a faded t-shirt, her braid loose, the adinkra ring glinting as she typed. Her phone buzzed, an email from Dr. Sophia Hernandez. The historian from Penn found Jonathan Kingsley's journal. Jonathan mentions Esther, a black woman, and a child. Grace, 1860s. Your ring symbols match his designs. Urgent, call me. Yvonne's breath caught, the name Kingsley hitting like a thunderclap. She'd known the ring tied to history, but this was personal, a thread connecting her to Alexander's family, to a past she didn't understand. The door swung open, and Joshua Ward, Kingsley's COO, strode in, his sharp features and slick suit screaming ambition. At 45, he was Alexander's right hand, but his eyes were cold, calculating, like he was always 3 moves ahead. "Porter," he said, voice smooth as oil. "You're digging into something you shouldn't. That ring of yours, Adinkra, right. Funny how it matches some old Kingsley records I found." Yvonne's grip tightened on her cane, her eyes narrowing. "What the fuck are you playing at?" "Ward." He smirked, leaning against her desk, the scent of his aftershave sharp and cloying. "Just a heads up. History's a dangerous game, especially when it's tied to this company. You might want to stick to fixing servers." She stood, her cane tapping the floor, her voice low, steady. "Threaten me again, and I'll bury you in code so deep you'll never climb out. Get the hell out of my office." Joshua's smirk didn't falter, but he backed off, his boots clicking as he left, the door slamming behind him. Yvonne sank into her chair, her heart pounding, Hernandez's email glowing on her screen. Joshua knew something about the ring, about Kingsley, about her, and that meant Alexander might know too. That night, Yvonne sat in her Fishtown apartment, her violin in her lap, the city sprawling below like a canvas of light and shadow. The air was sharp with the tang of asphalt and the faint promise of rain, the distant hum of SEPTA trains, a low lullaby. She didn't play, just ran her fingers over the strings, thinking of her mom, of Joshua's warning, of the girl she used to be, the one who believed in music, in love, in a world that didn't judge her every step. Alexander's words from the joint echoed. You're an inferno, but so did Joshua's. History's dangerous. Alexander texted. His message, simple. Need you at the office tonight. Found something in the archives. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the reply button. She didn't trust him. Not fully. Not with Joshua's shadow looming. But the ring on her finger, its symbols warm against her skin, felt like a call she couldn't ignore. She grabbed her cane and headed out. The city's pulse a steady rhythm below, her resolve hardening. Whatever Alexander had found, whatever Joshua was hiding, she was done running. It was time to face the fire. The penthouse office of Kingsley Enterprises in Philadelphia's Old City was a glass and steel cathedral, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a skyline that glittered like a promise under the morning sun. The air was sharp with the sterile tang of electronics and the faint cedar of Alexander Kingsley's cologne, a scent that lingered like a ghost. Ivonne Porter sat at a sleek desk, her laptop screen casting a harsh blue glow across her face, her fingers hovering over the keys as she sifted through encrypted logs. At 32, she was a cybersecurity titan, her mind a blade honed by years of outsmarting hackers. But today, her heart was a tangle of doubt. The adinkra ring on her left hand glinted, its symbols perseverance, wisdom, strength, feeling heavier with every passing hour, a reminder of the history tying her to Alexander, to a past that threatened to unravel them both. Her cane leaned against the desk, a silent partner in a fight she hadn't signed up for. She'd been at Kingsley for weeks, her days a blur of code and late-night talks with Alexander, her nights haunted by the journal Dr. Sophia Hernandez had sent Jonathan Kingsley's words, naming Esther, Yvonne's ancestor, and Grace, their daughter. The discovery had cracked something open in her, a mix of pride and dread, and Alexander's quiet promise to dig deeper had only made it worse. His touch last night at Makita's jazz joint, the slow dance, the almost kiss had felt real, but real was dangerous. Men like him didn't love women like her, not without an agenda. Her phone buzzed, a notification from a Philly gossip blog, the kind that thrived on blood in the water. She clicked it, expecting some fluff about Kingsley's press conference, but her breath caught, her heart plummeting like a stone. The headline screamed in bold, Kingsley fraud exposed billionaire's empire built on murder and lies. Below it was a scanned page from Jonathan's journal, detailing his love for Esther, Grace's birth, and William Kingsley's betrayal, forging a will, poisoning his father to bury the truth. The article called Yvonne a gold digger and Alexander a modern-day fraud, with a grainy photo from the gala, her cane circled in red like a fucking exhibit. Comments flooded in, each one a blade. She's just in it for the cash. Look at her. Who'd touch that Kingsley's playing the diversity card? Yvonne's hands shook, the phone slipping to the desk with a clatter that echoed in the silent office. Her chest tightened, the air too thick to breathe, her pulse a deafening roar in her ears. She'd been humiliated before schoolyard taunts. Septa whispers, but this was global. Her history, her pain, herself flayed open for the world to mock. The ring on her finger burned, a tether to Esther, to a woman who'd loved across impossible lines and paid for it. Yvonne wanted to scream, to shatter the glass walls around her. But all she could do was sit, her scars inside and out exposed for all of Philadelphia to judge. Alexander's boots thudded down the hall, his voice cutting through the haze, sharp and urgent. "Ivonne, you ready? The press conference is in." He stopped dead in the doorway, his eyes locking on her face, reading the devastation there like a map. "What's wrong?" She shoved the phone at him, her voice trembling with fury, barely holding back the tears. "This, you son of a bitch, you leaked it, didn't you?" He grabbed the phone, his eyes scanning the screen, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle ticked under his stubble, his face darkening like a storm cloud. "Fuck," he muttered, scrolling fast, his fingers gripping the device like he could crush it. "This wasn't me. Ivonne. I swear on my life." Bullshit. She stood, her cane scraping the hardwood, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall, her voice rising to a shout that echoed off the glass. "You needed a way out, didn't you? Make me the villain? Save your precious empire. I'm done being your goddamn pawn." "Alexander." He slammed the phone down, the sound sharp, his voice rising, raw and ragged. "You think I'd do this, tank my own company? I'm losing investors, contracts, my fucking name." "Then who did she?" roared, her voice cracking, reverberating like a gunshot, her hands shaking so hard her cane nearly slipped. "Who else knew?" "Alexander Hernandez, your PR clowns. Or did you just leave that journal lying around for some asshole to grab?" He paced, a caged lion, his hands raking through his hair, his boots thudding against the floor. "I don't know." "Okay, but I didn't betray you. You have to believe me. Ivonne, believe you." She laughed, sharp and bitter, the sound scraping her throat like broken glass. "I don't even know you. You're just a rich prick who thought he could buy a fix and a conscience." His face darkened, but he didn't snap back, didn't meet her fire with his own. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low, almost pleading, his eyes searching hers, desperate for something she couldn't give. "You know me, Ivonne. You've seen me, the real me, not the bullshit I sell to the world. That night at Makita's, the way you played that violin, I'm not playing you. Not anymore." She wanted to believe him, wanted it so bad it hurt. The memory of his hand on her back, the bourbon on his breath, the way he'd looked at her like she was everything clawing at her heart. But the journal on that screen, the words gold digger and fraud, were louder, sharper, cutting deeper than his promises. She grabbed her cane, her leg aching with every step, and headed for the door, her voice cold, final. "I need space," she said, not looking back. "Don't follow me, don't." Fishtown was buzzing by noon, the scandal spreading like wildfire through Philadelphia's streets. Ivonne walked into Makita's jazz joint, ignoring the stares from the regulars, their whispers slicing through the air like razors. The air smelled of stale beer and cornbread, the jukebox humming a low blues tune. Stormy weather. That felt too damn fitting. Makita was behind the counter, her usual warmth gone, replaced by a frown as she slid a coffee across the bar, the ceramic mug warm against Yvonne's hands. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice soft, heavy with worry. "You okay?" "No," Yvonne admitted, her voice barely a whisper, the weight of the truth pressing down like a boulder. She sank into a booth, her cane propped beside her, and stared out the grimy window at the street, where kids skateboarded, their shouts a distant echo. She felt exposed, like the whole city could see her shame, her debt, her desperation, the foolish hope that Alexander might be more than a contract. Her phone kept buzzing texts from Ava, a voicemail from Dr. Hernandez, probably trying to explain the journal leak. She ignored them. But one message, from an unknown number, stopped her cold. "You're a disgrace. Crawl back to Fishtown." Her stomach lurched, and she deleted it. But the words stuck, sharp as shards of glass. The bell above the door jingled, and Alexander walked in, his face haggard, like he'd aged a decade overnight. The regulars glanced up, their whispers sharp. "That's the billionaire, her sugar daddy." He slid into the booth across from her, his hands clenched, the scent of his cedar cologne faint but unmistakable, cutting through the joint's savory warmth. "We need to talk," he said, voice low, urgent, his eyes pleading. "There's nothing to say," she replied, not meeting his gaze, her fingers tight around the mug, the coffee's bitterness mirroring her own. "You got your headlines. Too bad they fucked you over, too. Damn it, Ivonne, I didn't do this." He leaned forward, his voice rough, desperate, his hands gripping the table's edge, the wood creaking under his strength. "I've got my team digging into it. Someone hacked my archives, stole the journal. I'm not the enemy here." She looked at him, her eyes blazing, searching for the lie, her heart pounding like a drum. "Then who is?" "Alexander. Because I'm the one getting torn apart. They're calling me a whore, a sellout. Worse. You think your money can fix that?" He flinched, like she'd slapped him, his hands tightening on the table, his knuckles white. "I'm trying to fix it, but I need you to trust me. Just for a second. Trust you." She stood, her cane banging against the booth, the sound sharp in the quiet joint, drawing eyes from the regulars. "You hired me, Alexander. You put a price on my skills, and now the whole world knows my history. I'm done." She started for the door, her steps uneven, the tap of her cane loud, but he grabbed her arm, his grip firm but not rough, his touch sending a jolt through her despite the anger burning in her chest. The joint went silent, every eye on them, the jukebox's blues, the only sound. "Don't walk away," he said, his voice breaking, raw with something that sounded like pain, his eyes locked on hers. "Not like this. I'm begging you, Ivonne." She pulled free, her heart pounding, her eyes burning with unshed tears, her voice cold, cutting through the air like a blade. "You don't get to beg," she said. "You don't get to act like this is real, when it's all a fucking lie." The words landed like a punch, heavy in the silence. The regular's stares a weight she could feel. She walked out, the bell jangling behind her, leaving Alexander standing there, his hands empty, the weight of her absence crushing him like a stone. They didn't speak for hours, but Alexander didn't stop. Alexander. He was waiting outside Makita's when Ivonne emerged, his car idling under a street lamp, the Squilkill's dark current glinting beyond. She froze, her cane tapping the pavement, her jaw tight. "I told you not to follow me," she said, voice low, steady, but her eyes betrayed her, flickering with hurt. Get in, he said, opening the passenger door, his voice rough, like he'd been shouting into the void. We need to talk, and I'm not doing it on the street. She hesitated. The city's hum a dull roar around her, the scent of asphalt and river mud thick in the air. She didn't trust him, didn't want to. But the journal, the scandal, the ring on her finger, they were a knot she couldn't untie alone. She slid into the car. The leather seats cool against her skin, the faint musk of the interior wrapping around her like a cage. He drove. The city lights streaking past, their silence heavy, charged, like the air before a Philly thunderstorm. The dashboard glowed, casting sharp shadows across his face, the scar above his eyebrow a pale slash in the dimness. I didn't leak it, he said finally, his voice low, strained, his hands tight on the wheel. I'd never do that to you. Then who, she snapped, her voice rising, sharp and raw. Joshua. You're bored. Someone's playing us, and I'm the one paying the price. He pulled into an empty lot near the Schuylkill, the engine cutting off, the sudden silence deafening. The city lights flickered through the windshield, their reflections dancing on the glass. I don't know, he admitted, turning to face her, his eyes searching hers, desperate. But I'm tearing my company apart to find out. You're not alone in this, Yvonne. Alone, she laughed, bitter, tears spilling over despite her fight to hold them back. The whole damn city's calling me a gold digger. Alexander, my mom's name, my history. It's all a fucking joke now. And you're sitting there like it's just another Tuesday. He reached for her, his hand hovering. But she didn't pull away. Not this time. His fingers grazed her cheek, wiping a tear. And the touch was a spark, igniting something she couldn't name. You're not a joke, he said, his voice breaking, raw with something that felt like truth. You're everything, Yvonne. And I'm fucking terrified I've lost you. The air crackled. The dashboard's glow painting their faces in shades of amber and shadow. She leaned into his touch, her breath hitching, and then his lips were on hers, fierce and desperate. A kiss that poured all his fear, his need, into her. It was raw, urgent, his hand sliding to her neck, pulling her closer, the leather creaking as she shifted across the console, her curves pressing against him. The city lights streaked through the windows, their breaths a ragged symphony. The cool glass of the windshield brushing her back as he deepened the kiss, his tongue tasting of bourbon and regret, her hands fisted in his shirt, nails digging through the fabric, the adinkra ring glinting as she clung to him, the world narrowing to the heat of his skin, the thud of his heart against hers. She pulled back, gasping, her lips swollen, tears streaming down her face, her voice a broken whisper. I can't love a lie. Alexander. He looked gutted, his hand still cradling her face, his breath ragged. It's not a lie, he said, voice hoarse, raw. I love you. Yvonne, and I'll burn this city down to prove it." She shook her head, pushing him away, her cane clattering as she grabbed it, her voice trembling but firm. "Prove it without me," she said, opening the door, the cold night air rushing in. "I'm done," back in her Fishtown apartment. Yvonne locked the door and sank onto her couch, the scandal replaying like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. The city skyline glittered beyond her window, cold and indifferent, mocking her with its beauty. She opened her violin case, but her hands shook too much to play, the strings blurring through her tears. The job at Kingsley was supposed to be her lifeline, a way to pay her mom's debts, maybe even chase her music again. Instead, it had stripped her bare, turned her into a punchline for Philly to laugh at. She thought of Alexander, his voice at Makita's, low and honest, his hand steadying her when they danced, the way he'd begged her to stay. Had any of it been real? Or was she just a fool for wanting it to be? Across town. Alexander stood in his penthouse, a whiskey bottle open on the counter, the amber liquid untouched, glinting in the dim light of a single lamp. The skyline stretched beyond the windows, a sea of light and shadow. But it felt empty without her. The scandal had cost him a $100 million contract, and the board was circling like sharks, but none of it hit as hard as Yvonne's words, "I can't love a lie." He'd fucked up. Not by leaking the journal, he'd never do that, but by letting her think he could. He'd started to love her, more than he'd loved anyone since his mom died, and now she was gone, slipping through his fingers like sand. His phone rang, the screen lighting up with a name he loathed, Joshua Ward, his COO, the man who'd warned Yvonne about dangerous history. "Rough day, boss," Joshua said, his voice slick with fake sympathy, dripping like oil. "Your little consultant's making waves. Better rein her in." Alexander's grip tightened, his knuckles white, his voice low, dangerous. "You slimy bastard. You did this, didn't you?" Joshua laughed, the sound cold, calculated. "Prove it." "Oh, wait, you can't. Sleep tight. Kingsley." The call ended, and Alexander hurled the phone against the wall, the crack of plastic echoing like a gunshot. He didn't have proof, but he knew Joshua was behind it. A snake who'd sell his own soul for a corner office. The question was how to fight back and how to convince Yvonne he wasn't the monster she thought he was. Yvonne didn't sleep that night. She sat by her window. Fishtown, a patchwork of shadows below, her violin untouched, the weight of the scandal pressing down like a boulder. Ava's texts played on loop in her head. "You're tougher than this shit, girl." But strength felt like a lie right now, a mask she couldn't wear. She thought of her mom, of Esther, of women who'd fought through worse and kept going. The ring on her finger was proof of that, wasn't it? She packed a bag, her violin, Clara's old scarf, the fabric soft and worn, smelling faintly of jasmine. She didn't know where she was going, but she couldn't stay here, not with Alexander's name tied to hers like a chain. She slipped out before dawn, leaving a note on her kitchen counter, her handwriting sharp. "Final, I'm done. Don't look for me." Alexander found the note at sunrise. The penthouse too quiet without her. The silence louder than any scream. He read it, his chest tightening, and crumpled the paper in his fist, the edges cutting into his palm. He'd lost his mom to a crash, his company to ambition, and now Ivonne to his own mistakes. But he wasn't the type to quit, not yet. He grabbed his keys and headed for Makita's, hoping Ava or Makita might know where Ivonne went. Philadelphia was waking up, the gossip louder than ever. But Alexander didn't give a damn. He'd find her, not for his empire or his image, but because she was the only thing that felt real in a world full of lies. Makita's jazz joint in Philadelphia's Fishtown glowed like an ember in the twilight, its neon sign flickering red against a sky bruised purple, the air thick with the scent of cornbread and the Schuylkill's muddy edge. Inside, the jukebox hummed a low gospel tune. This little light of mine, its notes weaving through the chatter of a sparse crowd, locals nursing sweet tea. Their voices a soft murmur, like a prayer. Ivonne Porter sat in a corner booth, her violin case on the table, her cane hooked over the seat. At 32, she was back in her Fishtown apartment, a cramped walk-up that reeked of mildew and regret, after 3 days of hiding from the scandal that had torn her world apart. The headline still burned in her mind. Kingsley fraud exposed. Every slur, every comment. Gold digger, whore, sellout, had carved a new scar, deeper than the one on her leg. She'd left Alexander Kingsley's penthouse to reclaim her life, but all she'd found was a city that saw her as a fraud, a nobody. Her phone was off, drained from dodging Ava's pep talks, Makita's worried texts, and Dr. Sofia Hernandez's voicemails trying to explain the journal leak. She sipped her coffee, cold and bitter, staring out the grimy window at the darkening street, where streetlights buzzed to life, casting yellow pools on cracked pavement. Fishtown pulsed with its usual chaos car horns, shouted laughter, the distant wail of a SEPTA train, but it felt hollow. Like her, she'd thought running would free her, but it just left her raw. Alexander's face haunting her, his voice at Makita's, rough with grief, his hand steadying her when they danced, the way he'd begged her not to leave. She hated him for making her feel something, hated herself for wanting it to be real. The bell above the door jingled, and Ivonne tensed, expecting Makita with another unsolicited plate of collards. Instead, it was Alexander Kingsley, his usual polish gone, his face haggard like he'd been through hell. His boots scuffed the worn floor, and the regulars, 3 old men sipping bourbon, glanced up, their whispers sharp. That's the rich bastard, her meal ticket. Alexander didn't care. His eyes locked on Ivonne, and he crossed the room in 4 strides, sliding into the booth across from her, his cedar cologne faint but unmistakable, cutting through the joint's savory warmth. "You look like shit," she said, her voice flat, but her heart pounded, betraying her, the mug trembling in her hands. "Feel like it too," he replied, his voice low, gravelly, like he'd been shouting into the void for days. "I've been looking for you, Ivonne." She leaned back, crossing her arms, her cane a barrier between them, her eyes hard. "Told you not to." "What? Your empire crumbling so bad you need your hired gun back?" He winced, but his eyes didn't waver, steady and raw, searching hers like he was drowning, and she was air. "This isn't about the company. It's about you. Bullshit. She grabbed her cane, ready to bolt, but his hand shot out, catching hers. His touch warm, firm, sending a jolt through her that echoed their last kiss, angry, desperate, real. "Hear me out," he said, his eyes pleading, the red glow from the neon sign catching the scar above his eyebrow, making him look almost fragile. 5 minutes, then you can walk, and I won't follow. She pulled her hand free, but stayed, her jaw tight, the coffee mug cold under her fingers, the jukebox's gospel a soft undercurrent, clocks ticking. Kingsley. He took a breath, leaning forward, his voice urgent, rough with conviction. It was Joshua. He hacked my archives, stole the journal, leaked it to that rag. I've got proof server logs, timestamps, the whole damn trail. Hernandez helped me trace it. He used her access to get the files. He wanted to bury me. And you got caught in the crossfire. I'm sorry, Ivonne. I should have protected you. She stared at him, searching for the lie, her heart pounding, her fingers tightening around the mug. His eyes were open, raw, like he'd stripped himself bare. No trace of the smug billionaire she'd met in his office weeks ago. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her voice softer now, trembling, the words heavy with doubt. "You dragged me into this mess. Alexander, you put my history on a fucking platter." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, his voice cracking, the sound jagged in the quiet joint, his hands clenching the table's edge. "I'm a selfish son of a bitch. I thought I could control everything, my company, my past, you. But you're not something I can control. You're the only thing that's felt real since my mom died." Her chest tightened, his words hitting like a fist, stirring memories of Makita's the way he'd watched her play, the violin string he'd given her, the grief in his voice when he spoke of his mother. "Real," she said, her voice shaking, tears pricking her eyes, threatening to spill. "You call this real? The whole city thinks I'm a whore. Alexander, my mom's name, Esther's story. It's all a punchline now. I've got nothing left." "You've got me," he said. The simplicity of it, the way his voice broke, stopping her cold, like a chord resolving after a long, painful dissonance. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to give me a chance to make this right. Not for the company, not for the press, for us." She laughed, sharp and bitter, but the tears spilled over, hot against her cheeks, her hands trembling so hard the mug rattled. "There is no us, Alexander. There never was. Then why does it hurt so damn much?" He leaned closer, his hands unclenching, reaching across the table, stopping short, his eyes burning into hers, raw with need, with truth. "I see you, Ivonne. Not the cane, not the scandal, not the bullshit the world throws at you. I see the woman who played that violin like she was tearing her soul open, who fights for her mom's memory, who stood up to me, to everyone. I'm in love with you, and I'm begging you to stay." The words hung there, heavy, like the air before a Philly thunderstorm, the jukebox's gospel swelling. "Let it shine. Let it shine." Yvonne's breath caught, her heart a tangle of anger, hope, and fear. She wanted to hate him, wanted to walk away. But his eyes, those damn eyes, held her, honest in a way she'd never seen before, stripping away the lies, the scandal, the pain. Before she could speak, the bell jingled, and Ava burst in, her pink braids a beacon under the red lights, her voice exploding through the quiet. "Ivonne, you okay? I saw his damn car outside and—" She stopped, eyeing Alexander, her tone dropping to a growl. "What's this asshole doing here?" "It's fine, Ava," Ivonne said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Give us a minute." Ava raised an eyebrow, muttering, "Hurt her, Kingsley, and I'll carve you up like a cheesesteak." She grabbed a sweet tea and perched at the bar, watching like a hawk, her presence a reminder of the world Ivonne still had. Even now. Ivonne turned back to Alexander, her hands steadying, the coffee mug forgotten, the gospel tune a soft anchor. "You don't get it," she said quietly, her voice raw, stripped bare. "I'm not your redemption story. I'm not here to fix you. I don't want you to fix me," he said, his voice fierce, unwavering, his eyes locked on hers. "I want you to be with me. No contracts, no lies. Just you and me." She closed her eyes, the weight of his words sinking in, the joint's hum fading to a dull roar. The gospel lyrics, let it shine echoing in her mind. She thought of her mom, who'd told her to fight for what mattered, of Esther, who'd loved despite the odds, of herself, who'd survived a world that tried to break her. And she thought of Alexander, not the billionaire, but the man who'd danced with her, who'd begged her to stay, who saw her when she felt invisible. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely audible, a whisper against the storm, her eyes opening to meet his. "But this is on my terms. No more games." His face softened, a smile breaking through, raw and real, like dawn after a long night. "No games, I swear." He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it, his fingers warm, calloused, grounding, like an anchor in a sea of chaos. They stood, and he pulled her into his arms, right there in the middle of Makita's, the regulars staring, Ava grinning from the bar. His lips found hers, soft at first, then deeper, a kiss that tasted of coffee and redemption, slow and deliberate, like a vow. The red light bathed them in a warm glow, the jukebox's gospel mixing with their breaths, her cane forgotten against the booth. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek, the rough scrape of his stubble grounding her, the faint scent of bourbon on his breath, wrapping her in warmth. For the first time, she felt like she was home, not a place, but a person, a moment. The next step was healing the wounds. Ivonne knew she couldn't move forward, not fully, until she faced the community she'd run from. Ava's apartment in Fishtown was a cozy haven, its kitchen bathed in the soft yellow glow of a single bulb, the air thick with the smell of fresh coffee and the faint sweetness of cornbread baking. Yvonne's cane sank into the worn linoleum as she walked, Alexander at her side, his presence steady but not overbearing, his hand brushing hers like a quiet promise. Ava was at the counter, pouring coffee, her engagement ring, a recent gift from her musician boyfriend, glinting as she moved. Her face hardened at the sight of Alexander, her dark eyes narrowing like a storm brewing. "You've got some fucking nerve," she said, her voice low, the mug clattering against the counter. "Both of you. Ava. Please," Ivonne said, stepping forward, her cane steady, her voice firm despite the knot in her chest. "I need you to hear me out." Ava's gaze flicked to her, softening just a fraction. But her arms stayed crossed, her stance unyielding. "I'm listening, Ivonne, but I don't trust him." She jabbed a finger at Alexander, her voice rising. "He's a snake, dragging you through this shit show." Alexander didn't flinch, his voice calm, measured, but heavy with conviction. "I deserve that. I fucked up. Ava. I put Ivonne in a bad spot, and I'll spend my life making it right. But I love her not because of some PR stunt, but because she's the strongest person I know." Ava's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt, her eyes flicking between them, searching for the catch. Ivonne took a breath, her voice steady, raw with truth. "Ava, I know you think I'm selling out, throwing away everything Mom taught me, but I'm not. I'm choosing my life, like she did when she worked double shifts for me. Alexander's not perfect, hell. He's a mess, but he sees me, and I love him too." The words felt like a release, a note she'd held too long, ringing clear in the quiet kitchen. Ava stared at her, her eyes searching, and for a moment, Ivonne thought she'd turn away, her silence heavy as stone. Then she stepped forward, her hand resting on Yvonne's shoulder, heavy but warm, her voice thick, cracking. "You're my sister, Yvonne. Always will be. If this is what you want, I'm with you." She looked at Alexander, her gaze hard but not cruel, her voice low, final. "You hurt her, Kingsley, and no amount of money will save you. Understood?" Alexander said, nodding, his eyes never leaving Ava, his posture steady, respectful. Ava poured a third coffee, sliding it to Alexander, the clink of the mug loud in the quiet, the air lighter now, like a storm had passed. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was enough. A crack in the wall between them. Outside. The Fishtown street was alive with evening noise, kids shouting, a car stereo thumping Lil Wayne, the wind carrying the scent of asphalt and fried dough from a nearby food truck. Yvonne and Alexander walked to his car, her cane tapping a steady rhythm against the pavement. "That went better than I expected," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips, the weight of Ava's acceptance lifting a burden she hadn't named. "Told you I'm charming," Alexander replied, but his grin was soft, not smug, his hand brushing hers as he opened the car door, the touch sending a quiet spark through her, a promise of what they could be. They drove back to the penthouse, the radio off, the hum of Philadelphia's streets filling the silence, a city that had judged them, but couldn't break them. Yvonne felt lighter, like she'd shed a layer of armor, the scandal's weight still there but no longer crushing. She glanced at Alexander, his profile sharp against the streetlights, and realized she wasn't just fighting for herself or her mom's memory now. She was fighting for them, for the fragile, real thing growing between them. That night, they stood in Alexander's penthouse office, the city sprawling below like a sea of light and shadow, the air warm with the scent of cedar and the faint buzz of electronics. Yvonne had her laptop open, code scrolling across the screen, her fingers poised to dig deeper into Joshua's trail. Alexander stood beside her, a bourbon glass in hand, his eyes on her like she was the only thing in the world, the skyline a distant glow beyond the glass. "We need a plan," she said, breaking the silence, her voice steady, grounded. "The press conference is tomorrow. Joshua's still out there, and the story's not dead. What's next?" "My team's releasing the proof about Joshua," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "It'll clear your name, take the heat off. But I want more than that. I'm rethinking Kingsley Enterprises' restructuring ownership, giving Grace's descendants a stake, inspired by you." She raised an eyebrow, a wry smile playing on her lips, her braid catching the office's soft light. "Trying to buy my approval now." "Kingsley," he laughed, leaning closer, the bourbon glass forgotten, the firelight catching the lines of his face, softening the hard edges. "Nah, just trying to be the man you deserve." She set the laptop aside, standing, her cane steady against the floor, her steps deliberate as she closed the distance between them. She rested a hand on his chest, feeling the warmth through his shirt, the muscle beneath solid, real. "You're getting there," she said, her voice low, warm, a challenge and a promise. "But you've got a long way to go." He looked down at her, his hand sliding to her waist, gentle but sure, his thumb grazing her hip, the touch sending a quiet thrill through her. "I'm all in, Yvonne. You know that." She leaned up, her lips brushing his. Not a kiss yet, just a whisper of what could be. The office's hum mixing with their breaths, the scent of cedar and bourbon wrapping them in warmth. "Good," she murmured, her voice soft, steady. "Because I'm not easy to keep up with." They stayed there, the city humming beyond the windows, the world fading to the rhythm of their shared silence, a moment of peace before the storm they both knew was coming. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and for now, that was enough. Fairmount Park wasn't a cathedral, but tonight it shimmered like one, its open-air stage strung with white fairy lights that glowed like fireflies against the velvet dusk. The air was thick with the scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming dogwoods, a sweet, earthy mix that felt like Philadelphia breathing. Ivonne Porter stood backstage, her violin tucked under her arm, her cane propped against a speaker. At 32, she was no stranger to the weight of eyes. Fishtown's gritty streets had taught her that. With her limp, her curves, her black skin drawing judgment like a lightning rod. But tonight, she wasn't Alexander Kingsley's consultant or the scandal's scapegoat. Tonight, she was a musician, a daughter, a woman reclaiming her story, her music, her soul, her cotton dress emerald green, flowing, chosen by her. Not Alexander brushed soft against her skin, her braid a heavy anchor down her back. The crowd, maybe 500 Philadelphians sprawled on blankets and lawn chairs, buzzed with anticipation, their voices a warm hum under the park's ancient oaks. This wasn't just a gig. This was her concert, her chance to rise from the ashes of the Kingsley fraud exposed headline that had nearly broken her. The scandal was fading, Alexander's team had exposed Joshua Ward's hack, clearing her name, but the whispers lingered, like ghosts. Tonight, she'd banish them with her gospel, her truth. Alexander Kingsley stood in the wings, his usual polish softened, his suit swapped for a navy shirt and jeans that didn't scream billionaire. At 38, he was still Philly's tech king. But here, he was just a man. His eyes locked on Yvonne, pride and something deeper burning in them, like a fire that wouldn't quit. Since Makita's, since that kiss that stitched their broken pieces together, he'd changed. No more smirks, no more control. He'd listened when she set her terms, supported her when she planned this concert, not with money, but with faith in her. In them, it was small, but it was everything. The event's organizer, a stout woman with a megaphone and a gospel heart, took the stage, her voice booming. Ivonne Porter, y'all, let's give her some Philly love. The crowd roared, louder than at Makita's, some whistling, a few shouting her name, their energy a tidal wave. Yvonne took a breath, her cane tapping as she stepped into the spotlight, its heat like a hand on her face. She didn't flinch. Not anymore. She raised her violin, the wood smooth against her chin, and began to play. The music was new, a piece she'd written in the dark nights after leaving the penthouse, when she thought she'd lost everything. It started soft, a single note, like a heartbeat, then swelled, weaving a story of pain, hope, and defiance. The notes soared, filling the park, spilling into the Philly night, a gospel hymn without words, rooted in her mom's kitchen. Esther's courage, Alexander's hand in hers. The crowd was silent, caught in her spell, and Yvonne poured herself into it, her body swaying, her leg aching but unyielding. When the final note lingered, bright as a flare, the park erupted, applause shaking the oaks, shouts rising like a chorus of amens. She opened her eyes, blinking against the spotlight, and saw Ava in the front row, screaming like a rock star fan, her pink braids a beacon. Makita clapped, her grin wide as the squeal kill. The crowd was on their feet, shouting her name, their voices a chorus of pride. Yvonne's chest swelled, not just with pride, but with something bigger freedom. Maybe. Or the knowledge that she was enough. Scars and all. She glanced at Alexander in the wings, his silhouette sharp against the stage lights. He wasn't clapping, but his eyes held her, fierce and tender. A silent, "You did it," a vow that needed no words. After the concert, the park emptied, but Yvonne stayed, helping Ava coil cables, the stage littered with dogwood petals tossed by the crowd. The air still hummed with the night's energy, the scent of grass and sweat mixing with the faint tang of river mud. Alexander lingered nearby, stacking chairs, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, a quiet ease in his movements that felt new, like he'd shed a layer of armor. Ava caught Yvonne's eye and smirked, her voice loud enough for Alexander to hear. "Your man's not half bad when he's not being a prick. Watch it. Pink hair," Alexander shot back, but his grin was warm, the kind that made Yvonne's stomach flip, a spark of something real. Ava laughed, slinging a bag over her shoulder, her engagement ring glinting. "I'm out. Don't do anything I wouldn't do." She winked and left. the stage gate clanging shut behind her. Yvonne and Alexander were alone now, the park quiet except for the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of crickets. She leaned her cane against the stage, her leg aching, but her heart full, the fairy lights above casting a soft glow on Alexander's stubble. His eyes. "You didn't have to stay," she said, turning to him, her braid catching the light. "I know you've got an empire to run." "Screw the empire," he said, stepping closer, his boots scuffing the wooden stage, his voice low, warm. "Tonight was about you. Always will be." She raised an eyebrow, her smile teasing, soft, getting soft on me. "Kingsley. Maybe." He stopped a foot away, hands in his pockets, giving her space to choose, his eyes searching hers, open, unguarded. "You were unreal up there. Made me feel like I was hearing you for the first time." Her throat tightened, his words hitting deep, stirring the memory of their first real talk. The dance at Makita's. She stepped forward, closing the gap, her fingers brushing his arm, the fabric of his shirt rough under her touch, a quiet spark passing between them. "You're not so bad yourself," she said, her voice soft, warm, a hint of challenge. "When you're not being a smug bastard." He chuckled, low and rich, his hand finding her waist, gentle but sure, his thumb grazing the curve of her hip, the touch sending a shiver through her. "I'm working on it," he said, his eyes holding hers, a promise in their depths. "For you." She didn't pull away, didn't want to. The air between them warm, charged, the scent of his cedar cologne mixing with the faint jasmine of her perfume, a heady blend that felt like home. She tilted her head, her lips inches from his, and whispered, "Show me." He didn't hesitate. His lips met hers, slow at first, like he was savoring every curve, every breath, a kiss that spoke of patience and need. It deepened, soft but hungry, his hand sliding to the small of her back, pulling her closer, her curves pressing against him, the steady thump of his heart a rhythm against her chest. The fairy lights hummed above, their glow weaving a cocoon around them, the creak of the stage fading into the rhythm of their breaths. The rustle of leaves, a soft counterpoint. His thumb brushed her cheek, tracing the line of her jaw, the rough scrape of his stubble grounding her, and she leaned into him, her bad leg forgotten, her body alive with want, with trust. The kiss, a vow they didn't need to speak. They pulled back, breathless, foreheads touching. The world, small and perfect in that moment, the scent of dogwoods wrapping them in sweetness. "You're my home, Yvonne," he murmured, his voice rough, raw with emotion, his breath warm against her lips. "I don't deserve you, but I'm all in." She smiled, her hand cupping his face, feeling the stubble under her palm, a quiet strength in the touch. "You're getting there," she said, and kissed him again. Lighter, a promise sealed in the night's embrace. Later. They stood on the penthouse balcony. Philadelphia's skyline, a sea of light below. The wind carrying the tang of city grit and the faint promise of rain. Yvonne's cane rested against the railing, but she didn't need it tonight. Not with Alexander's arm around her, steady and warm, his warmth a shield against the chill. The city hummed, alive with possibility, and Yvonne felt whole, like the pieces of her musician, daughter, survivor, had finally clicked into place. They'd married that morning. A small ceremony at Mother Bethel AME Church, its stained glass windows casting rainbows on the pews, the air thick with the scent of roses and the hum of a gospel organ. Ava had walked Yvonne down the aisle, her eyes soft with pride. Little Lily, Ava's niece, scattering petals in her tiny fists, giggling as she dumped the basket in one go, the crowd laughing, their joy a chorus. Their vows were simple, not poetry, but truth promises of partnership, respect, and fighting for each other through the storms. Alexander had looked at her like she was the only thing in the world, his voice steady. "You're my miracle, Yvonne." She'd smiled, tears in her eyes. "And you're mine, Kingsley." Now, as the skyline stretched before them, Alexander spoke, his voice low, warm against her ear, his breath stirring her braid. "I've got news. The restructuring's done 10% of Kingsley Enterprises to Grace's descendants, starting with you. The community stays intact." Yvonne turned in his arms, her eyes wide, the city lights catching the wonder in them. "That's... damn, Alexander. You did it. We did it," he corrected, his hand resting on her cheek, thumb brushing her skin, the touch soft, grounding. "You changed everything, Yvonne. Made me see the people behind the code." She raised an eyebrow, her smile teasing, playful. "By walking into your office and calling you an asshole," he laughed, the sound rich, free, like a weight had lifted. "By being you, by showing me what matters." She stretched up, kissing him, soft and slow, the wind tugging at her braid, the city's hum a distant song. "Don't stop," she murmured, her lips brushing his, her voice a quiet command. "Keep seeing them, the people. That's all I ask." He nodded, his eyes solemn, a vow in their depths. "I promise. And there's something else. I'm starting a scholarship for single parents' tuition, stipends, the works, the Clara Porter Fund. I was thinking you could run it." Her breath caught, the idea sparking something fierce in her chest, a fire that warmed her from within. She loved her music, her gigs, but this was a chance to give others the shot she'd fought for, to build something lasting. "Alexander, I'd love that. I'd fucking love that." He grinned, pulling her closer, his arms a steady anchor, his warmth a shield against the world. "Good. We'll start after the honeymoon. You, me, a cabin by the Poconos. Sound okay?" She smiled, leaning into him, her head resting against his chest, the steady thump of his heart a rhythm she could trust. "Sounds perfect." They moved to the balcony's edge, the night cool against their skin, the city's lights twinkling like stars brought down to earth. Yvonne felt the weight of their journey, the scandal, the fights, the moments that stitched them together, each one a thread in a tapestry stronger than steel. The stars above were faint, drowned by Philly's glow. But they were there, steady, like the love they'd built, not by chance, but by choice, by fighting for each other when the world tried to tear them apart. The weeks that followed were quieter, but not empty. Alexander made good on his promise, launching the restructuring with fanfare, Fishtown buzzing with hope, new opportunities rising alongside old row houses. Ivonne started planning the Clara Porter Fund, her nights filled with spreadsheets and dreams of helping others like her, single parents fighting for a chance. Ava became a regular, bringing cheesesteaks and bad puns, her bond with Ivonne growing with every visit, Lily's giggles a bridge between them. Makita kept Yvonne's favorite coffee stocked, her stories of Clara's youth weaving a thread to the past. Dr. Sofia Hernandez sent updates on Esther's history, piecing together a legacy Yvonne vowed to honor. Yvonne and Alexander fought sometimes about money, his stubbornness, her pride, but they always found their way back, their love a fire that burned through the rough patches, stronger for it. She kept playing, her violin a thread tying her to her mom, to Esther, to herself, each note a defiance against the world's judgment. Alexander sold a data center, funneling the profits into the scholarship, proving he meant every word about change, about being the man she deserved. One evening, they stood on the balcony again, the city softer now, the skyline a canvas of light and shadow, the air carrying the scent of rain and possibility. Yvonne's cane was inside, she didn't need it tonight, not with Alexander's hand in hers, his warmth a steady anchor. "You ever think about forever?" she asked, her voice soft, the question hanging light between them, the wind tugging at her braid. He looked at her, his eyes warm, steady, the city lights catching the lines of his face, softening the scars of their past. "Every damn day," he said, his voice low. "Sure, but I'm good with right now, as long as it's with you." She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, the city humming below, a song of resilience and hope. "Works for me." They stayed there, two people who'd walked through fire and found each other, not by accident, but by the stubborn choice to keep fighting, to choose love over fear, truth over lies. Philadelphia stretched out before them, vast and unbroken, a reminder that some things endured not because they were easy, but because they were worth everything. That's Yvonne and Alexander's epic love story. Loved it. Subscribe for more heart-pounding tales. And drop a comment. Would you fight for a love like theirs? Catch you next time.